The Egyptian president praises the UK Prime Minister's statements on Britain's move to recognize the state of Palestine. And dozens of aid trucks enter Gaza from Egypt for a fourth straight day. And an 8.8 magnitude earthquake strikes off Russia's remote Far East, triggering tsunami waves across the Pacific. And that was the headlines, and I'm Salma Alfi, and now the news in detail. Furthermore, Egypt's president met with Pakistan's military chief in Cairo, discussing Gaza, bilateral ties, and regional security cooperation. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed Gaza ceasefire efforts with Pakistan's Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman during talks in Cairo. The Egyptian leaders stressed the need for greater international action to end the humanitarian crisis and called for wider recognition of a Palestinian state as key to lasting peace. The two also explored ways to strengthen military and security cooperation, address counterterrorism, and promote regional and South Asian stability. Egypt's president has welcomed UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's statements on recognizing the state of Palestine, calling it a step in the right direction. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi praised the UK's move towards recognizing Palestine, calling it the right step to restore legitimate Palestinian rights. In a statement on social media, al-Sisi urged Britain to act swiftly and without conditions. He reaffirmed Egypt's firm position that a just and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian cause is the only path to lasting peace in the region. And Britain's Prime Minister says the UK will recognise the state of Palestine at the UN in September, unless Israel takes urgent steps on Gaza. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Britain will back Palestinian statehood at the UN unless Israel ends its Gaza offensive and allows aid access. Speaking after an emergency cabinet session, Starmer cited images of starving children and worsening conditions. He called for a ceasefire, resumed UN aid, and a halt to the West Bank annexation. The move aims to push all sides towards peace and reflects growing public pressure across the UK.
We see starving babies, children too weak to stand, images that will stay with us for a lifetime. The suffering must end.
And French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has welcomed Britain's plan to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN in September unless Israel improves conditions in Gaza. And Barrot described Gaza as a death trap where women and children are being killed even at aid distribution lines, calling the violence unacceptable and urging the international community to end the cycle of war and reopen prospects for peace in the Middle East. And Finland has joined France's declaration supporting a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, signaling future recognition of Palestine as part of a broader peace plan. And Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen said on X, the move sends a strong message for peace, citing steps in the right direction at the UN Conference on Palestine in New York. The declaration urges a ceasefire, hostage release, unhindered aid to Gaza, and calls on the Palestinian Authority to pursue demilitarization and disarm Hamas. And Israel's foreign ministry has rejected Britain's plan to recognize a Palestinian state in September, calling it a reward for Hamas, and that, in their words, undermines ceasefire efforts in Gaza. The response followed the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's announcement that Britain would back recognition at the UN unless Israel takes concrete steps to ease the humanitarian crisis and commit to a two-state solution. US President Donald Trump has said that he and the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer did not discuss London's plan to recognize a Palestinian state, which Britain aims to announce at the UN General Assembly in September. Trump warned that recognizing Palestine now would be rewarding Hamas and expressed concern over aid distribution in Gaza. "We sent money for food aid, but I want to make sure it's spent wisely and properly," Trump said aboard Air Force One after meeting Starmer in Scotland.
It was never really discussed, maybe a little bit at the news conference, but he was sort of discussing it with you. We never did discuss it, and we have no view on that. We're going to get a lot of money.
The U.S. State Department has criticized the United Nations Conference on the Israeli-Palestinian two-state solution, calling it an ill-timed publicity stunt that risks prolonging the Gaza conflict. And spokesperson Tammy Bruce said the event undermines ongoing diplomatic efforts, emboldens Hamas, and rewards terrorism. She emphasized that peace talks cannot move forward while hostilities continue and hostages remain in captivity. Bruce also defended President Trump's remarks on the UK's recognition of Palestinian statehood, stating the US supports open dialogue but opposes actions that may inadvertently reward violence.
And reward its obstruction and undermine real-world efforts to achieve real peace. As Secretary Rubio has made clear, this effort is a slap in the face.
And Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has emphasized the urgent need for a permanent Gaza ceasefire amid worsening humanitarian conditions. During his Washington meeting with Senator Lindsey Graham, Abdelati highlighted Egypt's regional role in security and peace efforts, including mediation with Qatar and the United States. He reaffirmed Egypt's commitment to a just Palestinian solution based on the two-state principle. Abdelati also stressed protecting Egypt's water security on the Nile, condemning unilateral actions, and praised the strong Egypt-US strategic partnership enhancing regional stability.
والله العظيم ولا حبة رز، والله العظيم ولا حبة عدس. ما فيش أكل، ما فيش شرب، عندي بنت 2.5 صارت نص.
And dozens of aid trucks entered Gaza from Egypt for a fourth straight day, following Israel's partial easing of its blockade. The move comes after Israel began 10-hour daily pauses in military operations and opened new corridors, responding to mounting international outrage after starvation in Gaza. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, the IPC, warned this week that famine is unfolding, with soaring malnutrition and children dying. The UN says aid deliveries remain far below what's needed. US President Trump has pledged new food centers for Palestinians, while Israel denies using starvation as a tactic, blaming Hamas for the crisis. And since October 2023, Egypt has played a crucial humanitarian role, delivering massive aid to Gaza amid the ongoing crisis. And for more analysis, we now move to Hani Saif in our newsroom. Hani.
Thank you, Selma. Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined from Cairo by Al Ahram Managing Editor, Mr. Mohammed Izzeddin. Mr. Izzeddin, welcome to Q News. How might President Sisi's call for swift and unconditional British action influence other nations' policies regarding Palestine?
Thank you for having me in Q News. Of course, this, got so many responses from all around the world, and the Britain press in the last hours they've talked about President Al-Sisi's statement that praised the UK's decision to recognize Palestine as a state. So this shows that there is an international interest in President Al-Sisi's statements. In addition, that the second statement from such a big country that was before from the French President Macron, that he intends to recognize Palestine through the UN, and so this means that there is a unanimous support from internationally to settle what's happening in Palestine, which is based on the two-state solution. And this solution is what Egypt is calling for, not only since the last thing that happened on the 7th of October last year, but even for many long years since we had the peace truce with Israel, and Egypt has been calling for a truce in Palestine as well. So internationally, the countries are interested in President Al-Sisi's statements about what Britain intends to do, and they are. It is unanimously acceptable that they want a ceasefire and to stop the war in Gaza, and also stopping the malnutrition that's happening, which is causing lots and lots of death over the military of what Israel is doing, especially in Gaza.
Mr. Izzeddin, do you expect, along with Macron's recognition of Palestine as an independent state, that Britain's recognition of Palestine will actually have a real felt material change on the peace process and regional stability and the situation on the ground?
There is a huge international interest, and it will have an effect on the peace process, but the Israeli statements or the US statements about this affecting the peace process, this is actually not true, because what's actually true is that recognizing Palestine as a state that has been under Israel's occupation for many years, actually this is the only solution. This is the only solution for a sustainable peace, and so the UK statements, have started getting the countries to take action and to take initiative to reach the two-state solution and recognizing Palestine. And the huge interest comes from that the UK was actually, it had the Balfour Promise, and so when today the president of the UK is talking about recognizing Palestine as a state, this actually balances things, and it goes to the interest of sustainable peace, and it will stop the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. And so the foreign minister's statements in the UK, they are actually very important, and they are very important internationally too, and it will have a huge impact and effect on the European countries. And according to the French foreign ministers, actually there are 25 countries that are ready to recognize Palestine as a state. So there is an international interest, especially after what's happening lately, with and the UK says that they will support them always, and so this shows how important it is for the countries to talk about a ceasefire in Palestine and getting aid into Gaza in an unpolitical or in a non-military way like the occupation forces doing, and also to aim for a sustainable peace by a two-state solution.
Mm-hmm. Well, since day one, Egypt has taken up the role of the mediator and humanitarian gateway. But nowadays, how is this role shaping the dynamics of aid delivery into Gaza?
Of course, Egypt has a huge role in all the positive things that are happening in Palestine. Egypt has endured a lot, either in wars or in its international stance through, over the tens of past years, and so it stands, especially in President Al-Sisi's and so without his intervention and without Egypt's intervention against the displacement of Palestinians, Palestine would have been done for, and there wouldn't have been sustainable peace. And so Egypt's stance on what's happening was very, very positive, whether in mediating to call for a ceasefire, which was actually which Israel didn't follow before, or by the aid that Egypt keeps sending to the Palestinian people and the convoys that it keeps sending, that doesn't stop unless the corridors are closed from the occupation army's side. And so the Egyptian stance and the wanting, insisting on putting so much effort to reach sustainable peace and to reach a ceasefire, whether by mediating or through some diplomatic methodologies, in addition to getting attention of other countries, and Egypt doesn't stop talking about what's happening actually, whether from the foreign ministers or the ministers or the president. And there is also a huge support from Egypt's people to stop the ceasefire and to stop what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza. So the Egyptian support is still ongoing, and it will keep on happening. And there are actually statements and reports from the Palestinian people and the international community and the Palestinian president that thanked Egypt for its role in stopping what's happening and helping the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Yes. From Cairo, that was Mr. Mohammed Izzeddin, the Al-Ahram managing editor. Mr. Izzeddin, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. Ladies and gentlemen, now we go back to Salma Al-Fi'i in our studios. Salma.
Thank you, Haney. And hundreds of Palestinians gathered in northern Gaza for aid as famine fears grow. Many came just for a bag of flour amid skyrocketing food prices and severe shortages. Others echoed their desperation. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, the IPC, warned Tuesday that famine is unfolding in Gaza with rising child deaths and restricted humanitarian access. Aid trucks continue to arrive, but demand far outstripped supply. And Israel's Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu has said that the mission to return the detainees being held in Gaza back to Israel should not be the primary goal of Israel's war in Gaza. They should be called prisoners of war, he said in an interview to a radio station, and prisoners of war are dealt with at the end of the war. And the Euromed Human Rights Monitor has raised alarm over what it describes as an unprecedented surge in deaths among elderly Palestinians in Gaza. And according to the group, dozens of elderly individuals have died in displacement camps in recent weeks due to starvation, malnutrition, and lack of medical treatment. The monitor noted that many of these deaths are often recorded as natural causes, as families frequently bury their loved ones immediately, and a clear reporting mechanism is lacking. In the last 2 weeks alone, hundreds of elderly individuals have reportedly flooded hospitals and primary care centers in states of extreme exhaustion, urgently seeking nutritional fluids. And Israeli settlers stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem under police protection, continuing near-daily incursions by right-wing groups. Though non-Muslims are allowed limited visits under the status quo, prayer and religious displays are prohibited. The visits, often led by settlers and politicians, have drawn criticism for inflaming tensions at the sensitive holy site. And moving on, Israel has said it intercepted a missile launched from Yemen that triggered sirens across parts of the country. While most projectiles have been intercepted or missed their targets, Israel has responded with multiple retaliatory strikes. The Houthi group has repeatedly targeted Israel and regional shipping routes in support of Palestinians amid the Gaza conflict. And moving on to Syria, where the UN's World Food Programme has said the entire population in Suweida governorate in southern Syria is in urgent need of humanitarian assistance following a recent surge in violence. Marianne Ward, the WFP's head in Syria, said both those still in Suweida and those who fled to neighboring Daraa are in desperate need. The WFP has delivered 250 metric tons of wheat flour to local bakeries, barely enough for 4 to 5 days, and sent ready-to-eat rations for 50,000 people. But with an estimated pre-crisis population of 500,000 in Suweida, Ward stressed that current supplies fall far short of what's needed.
It's not enough, so we're continuing to try and get more wheat flour into Suweida. Then RTEs, we've sent enough.
And moving on to Tehran, where Russia has expressed concern over the threat of further strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, warning that such actions could derail diplomatic efforts. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has said renewed cooperation between Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog depends on a guarantee of no additional attacks. The comments follow the US and Israeli strikes on the Iranian nuclear sites in June. Zakharova emphasized that dialogue remains the only viable path to reviving the stalled nuclear deal. One of the most powerful earthquakes on record, a magnitude of 8.8, struck off Russia's remote Far East early today, triggering tsunami waves across the Pacific. Tsunami warnings were issued for Japan, Hawaii, and the U.S. West Coast. While several people were injured, no serious damage has been reported. Authorities warned that the threat could persist for hours, though alerts have been downgraded in parts of Japan and Hawaii. Ports flooded in Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, and waves reached Japan's northern shores. And in Honolulu, panicked residents clogged roads as they fled inland. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said Russia is closely monitoring recent comments by the U.S. President Donald Trump regarding a possible resolution to the conflict in Ukraine and future sanctions. Peskov noted that while the Kremlin is paying attention to Trump's statements, Russia remains largely unaffected by new punitive measures from the West. The comments come amid renewed Western debate over sanctions policy and diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that the United States will begin imposing tariffs and other measures on Russia 10 days from today if Moscow fails to make progress towards ending the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump shortened the original 50-day deadline he set last month, signaling growing frustration with Russia's refusal to agree to a ceasefire after more than 3 years of conflict. And speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump said he is unconcerned about the potential impact of sanctions on global oil prices, pledging to boost the U.S. oil production to compensate. He warned that tariffs and other restrictions could affect Russia, though it is unclear how much impact they will have given Moscow's apparent interest in prolonging the war.
The various things that you put on. It may or may not affect them, but it could.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has condemned deadly Russian airstrikes on a prison and hospital in southeastern Ukraine that killed at least 19 people and injured dozens more. Zelensky said the attacks in Zaporizhia and Kamyanska targeted clearly civilian facilities, calling them deliberate and a response to international efforts to end the war. He urged the global community to apply more sanctions on Russia and maintain strong support for Ukraine, emphasizing that each new strike underscores the need for continued pressure. And southern Ukraine is battling a major locust invasion worsened by the ongoing war with Russia and extreme weather. With frontline areas inaccessible and aircraft grounded due to conflict, traditional pest control is nearly impossible. High heat disrupted ecosystems, and the 2023 destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, which left swampy breeding grounds, have all fueled the outbreak. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we have been covering. The Egyptian president praises the UK Prime Minister's statements on Britain's move to recognize the state of Palestine. And dozens of aid trucks enter Gaza from Egypt for a fourth straight day. And an 8.8 magnitude earthquake strikes off Russia's remote Far East, triggering tsunami waves across the Pacific. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. And don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.